22 years ago, Games Workshop released Inquisitor, a game that would change the Warhammer 40,000 universe forever. For the first time, fans got a glimpse into the dark underside of the Imperium of Man, seeing the grim realities of the far future beyond the armies we were used to seeing on the tabletop. Inquisitor was at the center of a key shift in the tone and style of Warhammer, leaving the bright colors and clean lines of the 90s behind for something darker, grittier, and more sinister. In this video, we're going to explore this iconic game, the miniatures, the rules, the incredible backstory, and ultimately why one of Games Workshop's best games disappeared and was largely forgotten. This is Inquisitor. With rules written by Gav Thorpe, Inquisitor was the vision of some of Warhammer's most creative minds. Rick Priestley, Jervis Johnson, Andy Chambers, and Alan Merritt all had a hand in the concept and creation, with the legendary John Blanche leading the game's visual design. Inquisitor is John Blanche at his best. Given a free hand to create, Blanche imagined dozens upon dozens of incredible character sketches and artworks, many of which can be seen in the rulebook. The rulebook itself is one of the most prized treasures in my collection, and features a ton of incredible images by other talented illustrators as well. Inquisitor was a labor of love by the team who produced it. Born from a simple concept of a 54mm skirmish game, Inquisitor evolved into a vessel to explore the different factions within the vast Imperium of Warhammer 40K, adding shades of grey and nuance to the setting, and muddying the line between the nature of good and evil for those who profess to do the Emperor's will. Inquisitor puts each player in charge of a small band of operatives, working for different factions within the Imperial Inquisition, a mysterious and powerful force within the Imperium. Inquisitors have the mandate to root out the enemies of mankind, the mutant, the heretic, and the alien, and they act as a secret police force enforcing compliance with the Emperor's truth across the galaxy. With nearly unlimited authority, Inquisitors are feared characters in Imperial society. Now, while Inquisitors have been around since the early Rogue Trader days, Inquisitor introduced the concept of warring factions within the Inquisition, divided by matters of faith, philosophy, and methods. From puritanical Inquisitors with a hardline hatred of Psykers to radicals who will use any means, alien, demonic, or otherwise, in the pursuit of their purpose, the Inquisition is riven from within. The line between heretic and the righteous is blurred, and the setting is an excellent backdrop for players to tell their own stories on the tabletop. Perhaps the best known Inquisitor in the Warhammer 40K universe is Gregoreisenhorn, who's featured in a trilogy of novels that bear his name. Over the past few months, I read the Eisenhorn books, and I immediately was drawn to the character of Eisenhorn. He's stoic, resourceful, and has a relentless will. I knew there was a pretty cool model of Eisenhorn released with the Inquisitor range sculpted by Brian Nelson. I've had one in my collection since I picked it up in a lot auction a few years ago, and I figured this was the perfect time to take it out of the package and give it some paint. Inquisitor miniatures were unique in that they were designed at 54mm scale, nearly double the size of the typical 28 to 32mm Warhammer mini. And with this increase in scale comes a great focus on detail and character that made me immediately fall in love with this game. As soon as I started painting my Eisenhorn mini, I knew I was hooked. After a lifetime of painting smaller scale faces, Eisenhorn's face felt like a giant canvas where I could really take the time to build subtle layers and tones, giving him a dour and serious facial expression to match his character in the books. Without a doubt, I think this has to be the best face I've ever painted in my life. In the novels, Eisenhorn isn't a lone operator. He has a crack team of henchmen that help him with all of his missions. Pilots, tech savants, psychic nulls, former bounty hunters, acrobats, all sorts of cool characters. As I kept listening to the books, I knew I wanted to build a team. Now the only problem is that Inquisitor miniatures have been out of print for years, but I actually really enjoy hunting for old rare miniatures online. I scoured Facebook groups, I looked on eBay, and asked around with my friends, and slowly my collection began to grow. Okay, if I'm honest, it wasn't really that slow. I kind of accumulated a lot of miniatures really quickly and went way overboard. Let me show you what I've done. I found this one, a character named Slick Devlin, at a shop near me unassembled. He's a grizzled gunslinger type and a perfect addition to my inquisitorial warband. I found this guy, the Arcoflagellant Damien 1427. Arcoflagellants are one of the gnarliest concepts to come out of Inquisitor. These are lobotomized prisoners kept in a hypnotic trance until their handler utters a specific keyword, at which point auto-injectors flood their veins with combat stimulants, sending them into a crazed frenzy of attack. This miniature is one of my favorites of the range too. It's just so grimdark and so awesome. On eBay I found this guy, Inquisitor Tyrus, sculpted by Gary Morley. He's a member of the Ordo Hereticus, also known as the Witch Hunters. He's actually missing a thumb, but I love the freehand Guy Fieri style flames that the previous owner painted on him. Inquisitor faced many difficulties catching on as a popular game when it was released. The rules allowed nearly endless customization of your characters, from stat lines to special abilities to psychic powers to dozens of different loadouts of weapons, armor, and equipment. Players were encouraged to convert and customize their own miniatures to reflect their unique characters and make them their own. The problem was that with the new 54mm scale, there just weren't that many bits and kits to choose from to convert your miniatures. Many veteran players have a bits box of leftover bits from kits they've previously built, but the larger size meant that most of these bits weren't compatible. Now, Games Workshop did their best to provide extra bits and weapons through mail order, but it was still a significant obstacle. One option is to use historical miniatures from other companies, like I've done here with this guy, who's a Napoleonic officer. This model's in a great pose, confidently striding forward, coat billowing out behind him, pretty similar to how Eisenhorn is. I've started converting one for myself, giving him this halberd that I got in a lot purchase of Inquisitor bits. I think with just a little more work and a few choice details, this guy will make a great interrogator model. I'm thinking maybe giving him a bionic eye and a few inquisitorial sigils, something like that. By the way, if you guys like grimdark characters like this, check out my Etsy shop where I have some great t-shirt designs, including this one, which is called A Light in the Warren. It features 3 interesting grimdark characters in a warren of pipes and gadgets and machines. I think it's a really cool design, and it helps support the channel. I'll put a link in the video description box below. Check it out if you're interested. Something that didn't exist when Inquisitor was released, that is without a doubt one of the greatest assets to somebody who's in the present day trying to go down the Inquisitor rabbit hole like I am, is 3D printing. With thousands of digital files out there and more being made every day, it's easy to find minis that will fit the bill as Inquisitors or their henchmen. After the release of Inquisitor, many of the characters and concepts from the game began to work their way into mainstream 40K. The Demon Hunters and Witch Hunters Codex introduced tons of inquisitorial characters and their henchmen, which are still playable in Warhammer 40,000 today. Until earlier this year, many of the models hadn't been updated for decades and became hard to get, so a lot of 3D printed alternatives existed online. Check out this guy, which I found on Cults 3D. It's a bald dude holding a book and a staff and a torch, and I think it turned out really awesome. I just scaled it up in my slicer and boom, I've got an Inquisitor scale mini. Again, I had so much fun painting his face. I was able to not just squint and pray when dotting his eye, but to give his eyes a focus and an iris and a pupil. And it just gives his facial expression so much intensity. I also found this model, which I thought would make a great servitor, and I gave him a large melta-gun. I even painted some flames on the barrel of his gun. I figured he'd make a good match for Inquisitor Tyrus. This guy is a fan-made model of Inquisitor Kotiaz, who's an Inquisitor from the Ordo Malleus who is best known for appearing on the cover of the Demon Hunters Codex. Scaled up to Inquisitor's scale, he makes another awesome character to appear on the table. I also printed this cool astropath looking character, this noble rogue trader looking lady, this tech priesty looking savant, and a few others which I haven't painted yet. But one of the coolest and maybe the best known models released from the Inquisitor range was Brother Artemis, a space marine from the Deathwatch chapter. I think Games Workshop assumed that many fans would love to have a larger space marine display piece, and they were right. Now, in my search for models, I couldn't find a copy of Brother Artemis, so I printed my own version of a Deathwatch marine. I call him Brother Cassius. He actually has the same Mark IV bolter hand from the Brother Artemis kit, which I had floating around my bits box for some reason. He's so tall and badass. He's really looking every inch the 8-foot tall super soldier that the proper space marine should. He absolutely dwarfs a regular marine. And from what I understand, in the Inquisitor rules, space marines are nearly invulnerable, almost to the point that they break the game, so I think he fits the bill. There's no reason that you need to stick to one method either. I've also been enjoying mixing 3D printed bits with original Inquisitor kits, and kit bashing together 3D prints. This is Preacher Joseph, one of the original minis that I was able to find still new in the box. In one of the bags of bits I'd found, I had the makings of almost another complete Preacher Joseph, just missing the head. So I found this cool cultist head and I 3D printed it, making this interesting cultist type guy. Here's a second cultist I made using 2 different 3D prints. I used some green stuff to sculpt a cowl onto his robes to match the one that the other mini has to make them look like they're from the same order or sect. Here's Inquisitor Covenant, given to me recently by a friend. My friend Bill found these two kits in a Texas hobby shop and sent them to me. I can't wait to paint these as well. And of course, everyone loves a good cyber dog. This is Enforcer Barbaretta and her loyal pup, which I found on eBay. I also somehow accidentally bought a second copy of Inquisitor Eisenhorn, which is a pretty rare mini and one of the best sculpts of the whole era for my money. Now, I could convert it into something else, but I thought it'd be nicer to just give it away to one of my Patreon patrons as a thank you for all the generous support. So that's what I'm going to do with that. All in all, I have more than enough minis now to make several warbands, which is really exciting to me. Because of the diverse nature of each warband, you can mix and match characters between games if you want, and you could even work that into a campaign narrative to suggest double crossing or changes in loyalty. With each character's personality so fleshed out, the possibilities are endless. The lack of minis was not the only problem that the new larger scale created for fans who wanted to get into this new game system. Another big one was terrain. With most guns having the range to fire across the whole table, Inquisitor is a game best played with a lot of terrain features and cover. Because of the larger scale, fans found that much of their existing terrain just didn't look right with Inquisitor minis. Building a whole table of terrain at one scale is already a daunting enough task. Building a whole new set for a new game system was a pretty big barrier to entry that scared a lot of people off. Now me, I've never been scared to make way too much terrain, so let's put together an Inquisitor table. The first thing I did was check my existing terrain pieces to see if they'd be size compatible, and to my pleasant surprise, a lot of them were. Weird idiosyncrasies of scale and the fact that minis are on bases mean that there's some wiggle room with the size of stairs and ladders, and things like industrial tanks or natural formations don't really strongly suggest any particular scale. Some of the railings on my pieces were a little bit low, but that's pretty easy to ignore. I found some great scatter terrain bits on Thingiverse made by a guy named 7 United, and after scaling them up a little bit, I was able to print a whole bunch of great computery cogitator looking bits, as well as a bunch of greebles that'll add some great detail. I decided to scratch build a few pieces that would specifically be for 54mm scale, just to sort of anchor the table visually. I wanted to get the feeling of the interior of a vast building, so I made this sort of L-shaped piece with a door in it that could go in one of the table corners. I used insulation foam to make a walkway about 5 inches high, and added a bunch of trim with some 3D printed greebills as detail. I also made this riser type piece in a similar way, with Foamcore walkway around it supported by chipboard girder struts. I made some simple foam stairs, and another riser, and then I painted everything by sponging on some grey paint in a few different tones. I also found this toy military vehicle. I bought this at a thrift store for my son. It's made by Chap May, which apparently made a range of toy soldiers for Toys R Us in the 90s. It's really quite cool, and the scale is perfect for Inquisitor. Now the final piece that made this table really special is actually somebody else's scratch building project that I found on eBay almost 2 years ago, and it's really good. It's like a wall of a factory made with tons of model kits from all sorts of ranges, some of which I don't even recognize. I made a very few changes to this thing, really just making some repairs and painting the edges black. This piece will make an awesome backdrop to go in the corner of the table and act as a really great focal piece to create this environment. Okay, let's set it all up. Now that I've made a really cool table of terrain, there's just one problem. I don't have anybody to play with.
I'll play with you.
I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and we'll see you next time on Eric's Hobby Workshop.